So today we have a repair we're going to do on this 2015 Ford Expedition. It has a leak, and yes, cars leak. They leak all the time. This particular leak, however, is a unique leak. It's not that it doesn't happen on these cars. It's just that it is one that can be highly misleading. The problem happens to be with the fluid tank for the radiator. So this is the part that we're going to replace, just brand new. The problem is with this particular hose connection. Now, because of the way the hose connection is set in the car, the fluid will leak down the hose and it will appear to have a leak in other places in the car. And so it can be something that's easily missed by many people. Many mechanics will miss that as well. The problem is you can't just replace this tank. The way Ford has made this, you've got to replace the entire assembly. So the hose, it fits on here and it will leak right around here. But as you can tell from looking at the hose, it's a little bit of a bugger to get into the vehicle. So we've got to take a fair amount of the air induction system apart in order to get this into place. So it's a long hose. You do not want to replace this with just a generic hose and try and get it to fit into place. It's got some very specific bends, and it's also got this Y connector here that needs to connect into one part of the engine. So it's a very specific hose. You need to really get this hose. So now we'll take a look at how this all fits together in the vehicle. So the part we were looking at sits down under here. So this is the air filter here. This is a pressurized system. And so the plastic tank here actually holds pressure. And that's one of the things that makes it difficult when it does start to leak. Again, in order to replace this, we've got to remove all this. We've got to take the intake hoses off to be able to get down in there. This hose snakes down in that direction, and so you'll see that we'll have to take a fair amount of this apart in order to be able to get at it comfortably. Now, because this is a pressurized system, we also need to be sure and drain the radiator, because one of the hoses we need to remove is one of the cooling hoses that goes to the engine block. And so when we remove that, if we haven't drained the radiator and got it down below that, you're going to end up with a bunch of coolant fluid all over yourself and all over your driveway or wherever you happen to be working. So to make life easier, we are going to go ahead and remove this panel here in order to be able to get at the different hose connectors and that a little easier. Now, a point of caution, the connectors are plastic screws. And so they're not half twist screws or that you see on other parts of the body trim. And so they can be a little awkward to get out, but they are a threaded screw and it's all plastic. So please don't get power tools on these. And there's a bunch of them that have to come out in order to lift this off. So we're going to take and get this off of here and then we'll pick up from there. So now it's time. We've drained the radiator. We've got the upper cowling and the lower cowling off so that we have better access to the hoses that we need to get at. Now we're going to pull the air filter and the electrical, and we're going to pull these hoses on this part. Now, personally, I prefer to use a 10mm socket on these rather than a flathead screwdriver. Do whatever you're comfortable with, but the flathead screwdrivers tend to slip an awful lot. And so I find it just a whole lot easier to use a 10mm socket on the end of a hex drive, and it makes things work a whole lot easier, and you're not going to be slipping and sliding and jamming into things with your flathead screwdriver. So we'll come back to you after we get everything all pulled apart here and go from there. Now, when you get to these kind of clamps, they actually lock themselves open if you do it right. Now, what you need is a nice long pair of needle nose pliers. I happen to have some that have different curves in it. You can do it with a straight needle nose, but let me show you what you do. Taking them off is really simple. Just make sure you get a good bite on the whole thing. And then when you pull it up, you'll notice it snaps into place and it locks open. So now it's completely open. Now undoing them is just, to get them tight again, is just a little more difficult. Not a whole lot, but you need yourself a small little screwdriver. So again, you get it up on there, you get the pressure off of it so that this is floating. And then at that point, just take and pry up on with your screwdriver, and then it'll just settle back into place. So that's how you undo and put on these type of clamps. You'll notice we have a bunch of them. We've got one there, we've got one here, we've got one here, and then there's some larger versions on different places on the car. So we've removed the air filter. We've got several of the hoses off. We're not completely finished removing hoses yet. We've now removed, disconnected the tube here from the canister. We cut it just a little bit to make it easier to get it off of there. You can cut it or not cut it. It's totally up to you. This bolt is a 13 millimeter for taking out the tray system they've got here. But this one over here, it is hidden a little bit behind this hood sensor. And so while you can disconnect the hood sensor, that doesn't really give you access to the bolt. So the smart way to do it, now some people just get on it with a box opening wrench or something like that. It really doesn't lend itself well to that. And on this particular bolt, you can see where somebody has rounded off the corners of it, trying to kind of jimmy it out of there. So the smart thing to do is to go ahead and remove the, or at least loosen up the hood sensor so that you can kind of rotate it out of the way and be able to have an easy access into that bolt. And it doesn't take too much. Notice I haven't taken it completely off, but I've got it just loose enough to where now I can keep it out of the way so I can get onto that bolt nice and square so that I'm not having to round off the edges. So that's all it takes. Sometimes you just have to move little things out of the way in order to really accomplish what you need. But you know, it's up to you. Like I say, the person who's done this in the past has rounded off the edges of that particular bolt in there. All right, so as you try and remove this, there's a couple of pegs in the bottom that has to fit into some holes, but you also have an air inlet here that goes into the sidewall. And you've got to kind of wiggle it around and pull on it until you kind of get it all loose so as you can get it out of there. And the last thing that'll give you trouble is the is that air item there. So you just have to kind of keep working at it until you can work it out. No reason to overforce it or anything like that. So you'll also need to remove this air intake here and put it on the one you're replacing it with. And you'll also need to remove these rubber grommets that the screws hold down on and put it into your new one. Your new one may have those with it. It depends on whether it's a genuine factory part or whether it's an aftermarket part. Frankly, they're all made in the same mold, so it really doesn't matter. You just have to make sure you have all the pieces that you need. All right, now there's a couple of things you have to take off the old one and put on the new one. One is these clips to hold your piece together. Now you'll notice the clips have kind of have circles down here that go around the mounting bar that's inside here. Now in getting them out, you need to be real careful because they can crack, especially if they're fairly old. The technique I use is to use a curved needle nose pliers, get just on the edge of where those clips are, hold it real tight, and then use the top to pry it loose and to pop it off of there. Now you need to go slow and easy and watch what you're doing, but you know, that's how we took these off of the old one. Now when you put them on, it's a little easier. You want to take a hammer. Now you're not going to hit anything. You're going to take and just slide it down into place, get the hammer so as you have a nice level surface on there, and then you're just going to push it down onto, if I got that on there right, yeah. So then you're going to just I might have to put that down on the ground to get the leverage, but you're just going to push it down on there, and you can see that that just popped it on. So that's how you get them on. Oh, didn't quite get it completely on there. There it goes. So you can see it takes a little bit of effort, but you can get those clips on there. Now the other ones you need to take care of are to remove these mounting grommets. The way to do that is you take the center out of the grommet, and then this becomes real soft and pliable, and it comes out real easily. Take it out of the old one, put it in the new one, and put the center flange back into it so as it'll mount to the body of the car. We took the old one out, that it was somewhat restricted by this air intake, which goes into the sidewall of the frame. We've already put this in. It's just a matter of collapsing it enough to get, you can use a screwdriver, collapsing it enough to get these clips down so you can pop it out there. Once you get it popped out on the top, then you come around on the bottom and you get a screwdriver down in there and pop that loose, and then the whole thing will come out for you. And then you'll have all the parts on your new piece that you need to have to put it back in the car. Now, we aren't quite ready to put this on the car yet because we haven't finished removing the hose, and that's what we're going to work on next. So we're getting ready to put the hose back in. We've had a number of activities and a number of issues going on today, so now we're back to the Ford so we can finish putting it together. We have it all apart. Now, depending upon the exact configuration of yours, you may have to remove more hoses and hose clamps to get things out of the way. Just remember that shortcuts probably lead to problems. So, you know, if you have to move something, move it. It's going to be your best bet. Now, on ours, we had some issues with a couple of these clamps because of how they were positioned. So, for example, this clamp was down underneath where we couldn't really get at it. And you may have similar problems. You'll just have to be creative and figuring out what needs to move and how you need to move it. Now, our strategy was, and your strategy may be different, you just have to look at your automobile carefully and look at your Ford carefully and decide what is the best strategy for you. We took this part off first and removed the container, the old container, and got the new container all put together. You saw that in a previous segment of this video. We then took this end off next, as it seemed to be a little more accessible, but it did have some issues because of how the clamp was positioned. And then the last clamp we took off was this one here. So depending upon your situation, you know, you may or may not use a different strategy. That was what we did. So now we're going to put it back in. We're going to kind of go in the reverse order that we used to begin with. We're going to put this one on first, then we're going to connect this one, and then last we'll put the box in, get the box all situated, put in place, and then we'll do the final connection on this one, which is just a snap-in connection. So we'll show you parts of this as we go along. It's way too long to show every step and everything we're doing as we're going. So we'll see you back here in a few minutes when we have more of this put together. All right, so now we've got the main hose in that we were working on. We showed you the hose, and we've got that in. We put it in the order we indicated while we were on camera earlier. We've now got our box in. We are now tightening the box up against the firewall here to make sure that we've got that in nice and snug. Remember that you still have your sensor, your hood sensor that needs to go on there. So we'll finish that up. Now, a trick that I've used for years, and it's not anything unique, a lot of people are aware of it, but I always put grease on the end of the hoses before I put them on. Trying to slip on a dry hose onto a dry flange just doesn't work very well. I mean, you can get them on, but if you put a little automotive grease on it, or a little pool, if you have a swimming pool and you have pool grease, something like that, you'll find that it just slides on so easy, and it's not going to deteriorate the hose. It's not going to cause any problems. We were able to finish up the putting the hoses together. We've got all the intake and the turbocharger airflow ducts all put together. We've got the air filter back in, and we also have put some radiator fluid in. Now, clearly your radiator is going to be low on fluid. So watch your radiator for the next few days, because it'll continue to suck out of your radiator overflow here. In fact, if you have an idea of how much fluid you've lost, you may want to go ahead and overfill this a little bit. Now for running, once you have it full, I don't recommend overfilling this. But right now, every time you get your engine hot and you turn it off and it cools down, it's going to suck a lot of fluid out of it into the radiator to make up for that void that's in the radiator. So at this point, you could overfill this a little bit. I wouldn't overfill it a lot, but you are going to have to watch this to make sure that you get enough radiator fluid in and your system's running smoothly. I'd watch it real closely for maybe a week, depending upon how much you drive, and I would make your first couple of drives long enough to get your engine good and warm, but not long distances or anything like that, because you really want to make sure you get rid of all the air out of your radiator before you really start taxing the cooling system. Other than that, I hope you've learned a lot. It's been a pleasure working with you and showing you how to do this. Please visit our channel and like our channel. And if there's any tools or items that we've used on this video that will be linked below, be sure and click on those, because that helps us help you. And that's what we're all about. Thank you.